I'll call this meeting to order. It is Tuesday. No, it's Thursday. Thursday, April 10th, 2025, and it's 11 a.m. and we're here under a workshop for the vehicle use policy. And I will turn it over to Commissioner Cowles. You want to?
Yeah, I'll just give you guys an idea I threw out, and underneath is just, the more I think about it, the more I add to it. So the underneath is just little notes of other ideas. And I just thought maybe you two would want to look it over too, and if you have any ideas, just start marking it up. And
okay, so this is
that.
So this is in addition to the vehicle policy.
Yes,
this is kind of
to be added to
a
it.
checklist for the vehicle policy.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It'll be the Shoshone County safety vehicle safety checklist form. And what would happen, my idea is they fill it out daily. It's on a clipboard in each of the vehicles, but they only submit it monthly.
Okay.
And then it can also, the supervisor can sign it, and then BOCC can initial it to verify they've seen them all.
Okay.
And just each department would have their own file with that checklist. And I will say, though, with Public Works, they already have something in place.
Okay.
So it seems to work.
And
well.
It does, and that might be something that, to mention to the board, that we already have that implemented on the back side of our time card, so it's filled out. So at the risk of being redundant, having them, fill it out here and then fill it out over here, that might be something for the board to think about.
Okay.
How that would work for
Right.
Public Works.
Okay.
Yeah. And yours are daily, correct?
Daily, correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this sheet is just for the month. So each time they get in the car.
So
it's
but
on a
it's daily
clipboard.
that they check
Yes,
this.
daily that they check everything off, but they only submit it to us once a month and to their supervisor.
Okay.
So if this were somebody that doesn't use their vehicle every day, this would just be when they use it.
Yep, correct. Yep. And then like I said, this is just, you guys can mark it up how you would like to see it. I started adding on another one.
Okay.
Some other ideas I had, but it just kind of gives everybody something to think about and how you would want to see it.
I like the idea that we make sure that the vehicle's being inspected, especially with the oil, and tires, body lights. I see where other departments actually do the same thing. Other counties require the same thing. So I think it is a step in the right direction.
Yes.
From a official records retention process, do you want to store however many employees we have? 50 employees. How many people drive cars? 20? We got 20 employees driving cars?
Probably more than that.
So 20 checklists a month. Where are we storing them and how are we storing them? Versus digitally versus having one you just keep in the car, and if there's ever an issue, you have a checklist to go back to verify.
I think that it's important that,
oversight,
the supervisor, that they know.
Do a digital version and email it to the commissioners or once a month, and that way there can be a digital copy kept for each vehicle, and if there's a file somewhere for each vehicle, you could
That might
have
be
the checklist stored there rather than
just have them scanned and sent to us, and then they can.
It's an easy Excel spreadsheet. You fill it like our timesheets. We fill it out, and it can be a PDF version of that page, and that way
Okay, I like that.
your supervisor will be able to see it, and you have a digital version of it.
Yeah. And the reason for the clipboards in the cars too is because if a supervisor wants to make sure they're doing their daily checks, they can go in at any time and see that clipboard in the car and see that they've verified during that month that they have been checking.
Okay. And I think the other thing that I would kind of like to see is a service. I've talked to other counties and also the state when they have their vehicles, they have a service schedule. And so it also helps set the time of sale on the vehicle. I mean, if you have a record of when the oil was changed, and that would be something we probably want to look into, the service record. And I know
like a maintenance.
I know the state requires it. They're really big on the service, and I think that's part of the problem is if you don't do either, you're kind of, because if you do the service record all the time, then you don't have where you run out of oil. But then, you know what I'm saying? But checking the oil daily is something that's...
It is a big deal.
I do the same thing. You know, it's just...
It really is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's times when you may have run something over or something came loose when you went over a pothole, and the next day you don't have oil, and it's a
things
big deal.
happen.
Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Same with tires.
Let me ask, so it makes sense that BOCC sees these for the folks we supervise, but are you suggesting also that we would
All
see the
assets.
sheriffs? We'd see the sheriffs and everybody's?
Right, because we are management of assets, so we got to make sure the vehicles are all being maintained and verify it too.
Okay.
And then do you mind if I say something about just in the vehicle policy? Naturally, there's a lot that needs to be taken care of here, but one that bothers me is page 3 of 6, B. I don't know if you noticed that one.
Anybody can drive the car.
It says, in addition to the employee assigned or permitted to drive a Shoshone County vehicle, he or she may allow others as necessary to operate the vehicle if they have a valid driver's license and are 25 years of age or older.
So that would mean that they could allow somebody outside the county to
because it's not defined.
If you scratch that and leave
Yes.
that in another approved county employee
Yes.
that can drive a car.
Yes.
So that
More defined.
my wife shouldn't be driving the county vehicle,
Yes.
But Shane could come get the car and take the truck home or do something.
Yes.
Jessica could come get my truck and take my truck home.
Yes.
Do whatever. But yeah, definitely need to reword that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems to me if you just change the word others to other Shoshone County employees, then the policy would make sense.
Or approved employees, because not every employee
Right.
is going to be approved.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I want to say another approved employee.
Good point.
Okay.
Certainly in an emergency situation, I suppose you do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
But in a general sense, you don't want your policy to say, sure, anybody can drive our car.
And roads has been officially using this policy all along. Okay.
Although we don't entertain option B on that.
Yes.
So thus far, that has been where I am at on the policy.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Well, I think I think we're going in the right direction with the vehicle checklist, and I think we also need to have a make sure that we do have a maintenance
log.
because it is up to the employee to maintain the vehicle. And if we don't see where they're maintaining it, it kind of loses, we have problems.
Like, for instance, just to paint my own kettle black. We've had the oil changed on our vehicles, but there's no particular record of it other than I have to go find the bill when we paid the place to do the thing.
Right.
There's no oversight of whether or not we actually changed the oil.
Right.
Yep.
And so that probably should be tightened up.
Implemented.
Yeah, and it'd be easy just to keep.
I mean, there's times I go back, when did we change the oil here? 'Cause it
Yeah.
takes me a while to put 5,000 miles on that car, so.
And it'd be good to just kind of have them like a clipboard in the car or whatever, and just keep it there.
And
Yeah.
Public Works is a little bit different in that we have in-house mechanics.
Yep.
And
Yes.
so, you know, we wouldn't have the receipt or the invoice, you know, for that, but
Right.
we do,
Have a
records
maintenance
of that. We
schedule.
have
Yeah.
maintenance records that we keep on all of our
Yeah.
vehicles.
Okay.
So we know, I can call at any time, and ask, you know, the status of any of our pieces of equipment. When was that oil last changed? When was that looked at? When was the last service? And they would be able to provide records.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a
Perfect.
good idea.
Yeah. And you had some ideas before too, Jessica, about you wanna talk about those again for the vehicle policy, like how you can define it better for certain departments versus.
So, like, are you referring to like of the take-home vehicles, that type of thing, or the?
Yeah, you had discussed before about, was there a way that we can put something into the policy where this is for, you know, this department, you know, this section is
Yes,
for.
so that kind of dovetailed off of something that we kind of talked about, you know, previous to you coming on.
Yeah.
That if there's going to be any deviation from this master policy that pertains to certain departments, like maybe Sheriff's Office has something that's exclusive to their department, or Public Works, or Solid Waste, or any of the other departments for that matter, that maybe there should be the master policy, but then something that refers to an additional portion of the policy for that department. So, because not everybody
Right.
is the same. You know, the usage is completely different, and so
Maybe.
you know, that's something that we kind of looked at. One of those things that kind of came in, and some of the questions that have always been asked is, you know, who gives permissions to use the county vehicles? You know, who allows the permissions? How is it determined which employees or which positions have a vehicle to take home? How is that managed or vetted?
And I agree with that.
Yes, and so it really, you know, is very vanilla in here and very vague.
And I think that's a good point.
You know, I know that's something that's been brought up by the public several times, and you know, questions that have been asked by some of you as well. And so if there were to be separate things for separate departments, you know, that's something that you could do without making that provisions countywide in the policy,
Right.
you know, and then having something specific to a different
There
department.
were certain allowances that sheriff department vehicles get to use that wouldn't apply to us and PZ.
Right.
We should have
but-
the same allowances.
Yeah.
One of the things
Well,
that we have to be careful of is when we allow an employee to take a vehicle home, we are giving that employee a raise. So, and that's required, you know, and it should, you know, we should be making sure that, you know, we're accounting for that.
Sure.
And so I think the BOCC needs to be notified that, because that is an extra benefit, and it is, and then there is tax
Well, and then there is
consequences.
it has to be tracked for tax purposes. And so that might be where something would differ, like from, I'll just use my department, for example, Public Works and the Sheriff's Office. Because while it might be an extra benefit for them, if they have the take-home vehicle, they're not going to be applicable to pay those taxes. You know, whereas our department, depending on the exemptions, like me and the pickup that I drive that's assigned to me is not set up with a slip tank. There are no provisions for exemptions on my vehicle, so I'm subject to pay that tax. You know, whereas some of the other ones might not be, and so that might be something that could be addressed if you wanted to do it in a policy in a separate section. That way, not everybody's getting flooded with, you know, 24 pages of policy that don't pertain to them.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've got to probably work out with the Sheriff's Department, because I know they have they're on duty, they're on call for 24 hours. Some of the other departments do it one way, some of the other departments do it the other way. And then you have patrol, and then you have jail. That's a complete difference between. So, yeah, we'll have to work on that.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with just kind of sitting down. What do you do? How do you utilize this? Why do you utilize it this way? What is the reasoning for that? So everybody has a better understanding of how the vehicles are used and why they're allowed or not allowed. Specifically like for take-home vehicles or what have you.
Exactly.
Well, I think you could look at it as we have a general policy for vehicle use, and it probably applies to certain other general use vehicles, but then have an appendix for the sheriff's department, an appendix for the public works department. And you can outline how are you exempt, what's considered exempt, what's not considered exempt, and then in both you have those employees that are taking vehicles home have to meet one of these exemptions, or if you don't, you're subject to these benefit requirements, and you can put that in those appendixes. And that way, as things change in those realms, you can go change that.
Right.
And then sheriff's department can pay attention to the sheriff's appendix, and they don't have to pay attention to the P&Z appendix,
right,
and vice versa. But that would be a way to clarify it and define it, and that way it can be followed.
Okay. And I know you guys part time of the year, when it's plow season, it's it's easier to have them have the vehicle at home and then take off.
Because then they can go directly from their residence to their route. Now, our internal rule with that, in particularly the bigger districts, if you have to pass the shop to get to your route, then you're going to you're going to have your personal vehicle. But if it's better for the county for you to take that vehicle to the route that you plow, or if you have a greater route, like let's use Dawson Pass for example, that employee goes directly up there because the grader is staged at the bottom of the pass plugged in. They drive that county vehicle right to there so they can get started on that hill immediately. And so it's a little bit different in each district depending on how the plow routes are set up and who's assigned to what plow route.
Okay. Sounds like you guys have it handled.
Pretty well. I feel it's worked very well, and it's really decreased our response times and our ability to go out and take care of something, particularly with the snow.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense to drive the vehicle all the way in and then go all the way back out.
Yep, and then
10 extra miles.
With the winter time, not everything can be parked inside. Then you're at the shop at your starting time. You're having to wait for your vehicle to warm up, so then you can go out to the plow route. And it just is kind of a waste of time. And so I don't know because I wasn't here when it was decided that would be allowed. But that's always been what's been conveyed to me about it.
Okay.
Are you aware the specific code, Idaho code citation about what's exempt or what's not exempt for benefit?
No.
So we can draft that up to
make
a checklist or sort of figure out, is there a choice or is there can you make a choice to be exempt or not exempt, or what makes you exempt or what doesn't make you exempt, and then that can be presented to.
I actually have it printed out. I just haven't sat down and read it.
Mr. Chairman, are you open to other suggestions on this policy today? Or we?
Yeah, we can. We're just here to discuss it and
workshop.
Okay. Page 4, section 11. Just a point of discussion. I'm sure there's pros and cons. It says that if you speed or do anything else criminal with your car, that you're personally liable, and the county won't reimburse you. You have to pay your own speeding tickets, etc. I suggested it also say that if you commit a crime, speeding or something like that you have to inform your supervisor, because we're going to hear about it through the grapevine because they were driving a county vehicle when it happened and people saw a county vehicle pulled over. I would just suggest a line at the end of that says, in these cases, your supervisor must be informed within 24 hours or something. So we're not hearing it roundabout. it'd also be helpful that way if somebody gets 3 of those or 4 of those, that we were aware of a problem.
Mm-hmm. It's a good idea. Yeah.
Like, do you have a policy like that right now?
No, we don't.
It seems like even crashes, we've had some confusion in the past.
Yes.
If there's
Yeah,
a crash,
and-
I have to inform my supervisor and call the police, and I have to
Yes.
do some things with that. I can't just drive away.
Yeah, and I think that's in the policy here about the crashes.
Yeah, it outlines, and I think where, a few things, it's good that we're talking about this, because some of, this was done in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And some of our longer standing employees haven't looked at this since they signed it, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get going along, we did run into a little bit of confusion as to whose responsibility it was to notify law enforcement. And I think some of that was just kind of lost, notify the supervisor notifies law enforcement. But how the policy reads is the driver is responsible for notifying law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And then it talks about notifying their supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I've clarified with my staff to make sure that that's, pretty well, but that's how it reads in here, and that's appropriate. It should ultimately fall on the driver. They've been in the accident, they need to be able to report that to law enforcement, and that all accidents must be reported.
So, but, maybe we need to have, because if we had people sign it every year, we would have, we would be getting more records and filling everything out.
Yes, it would be almost like a refresher, because then they are signing that they have, reviewed that. Yeah.
But maybe we
And
can also, go ahead.
Oh, and also having the vehicle policy in all the vehicles.
That's what I was thinking. If we had the vehicle policy in all vehicles, or some type of policy, so
You can have it in a binder,
if this
a
happens,
little binder.
if this, if you're in an accident,
You've got something to refer
Exactly.
to in case you get confused or something like that.
Exactly.
and
You
same way
can't
with
reach your
the ticket.
supervisor immediately.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it would behoove us to keep track. I mean, by policy, you're already supposed to report your accidents, but if we were reporting those and traffic violations in the same way, that would make sense. And I think as stewards of the equipment, we would want to know that information. I don't want to find out on the 6th speeding ticket or the 7th accident that this has been a repeat problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
My other suggestion on page 4 was under vehicle maintenance and repair, section 12. We have some loose language, and I think that invites trouble in policy. It says prior to scheduling major repairs or major maintenance. I think we ought to define that as over $300 or over $500, something, so it's not a judgment call
Have it.
on what we
Definitive
mean by
number.
major.
Yeah, well, major. See, that's we probably want to do some definitions, because that's where we're having a problem with is major is we already have a policy that talks about anything under $1,000. So this would be anything over $1,000, but major repairs, and then we have maintenance. We kind of talked about that with the sheriff's office last time. Maintenance is your brakes, just things that wear out, your tires, things like that. But when you have an engine go out, when you have a transmission go out, or you have things that, like that, that's called a major repair. And those need to be brought to our attention. One of the things is even though that it's budgeted, it's still anything over that, even though it's in your budget, you still have to come and get permission to spend it.
Blown a motor.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have to pay attention.
Yep.
So I think we should define those better, so that somebody doesn't feel trapped down the line that they didn't understand it, they didn't report it. Even if we just said prior to scheduling repairs over $1,000 or major maintenance needs over, just putting something in there to
I
make
agree.
it clear.
Yeah. I know, even the maintenance, I mean, we've got maintenance right now that's almost $5,000.
Yeah.
And it was maintenance.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Once you get into the tie rods and your front end, and it can get expensive.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I had just a thought on 12 as well, looking at A. If the Shoshone County vehicle is in need of repairs, the vehicle should be taken to your supervisor. It might be kind of nitpicky, but the wording in there, you know, says you should take it to your supervisor. My thoughts are you're driving it and you have some of your warning lights come on. This is instructing you to take it to your supervisor. You know, literally. You should notify your supervisor, something along those lines. You know, this, to me, looking at it, you know, take the concern to your supervisor, notify your supervisor, because the wording on this says pretty much drive it to your supervisor. I mean, it could be nitpicky, but if you're looking at revising the policy.
And maybe we need to kind of, you know, dumb it down a little bit, but not really. But if the service engine student light comes on, immediately take it to your supervisor, or, you know, because there's a lot of things that people growing up aren't understanding.
Yeah.
So
I think what it's intending to come across or convey is if your vehicle is in need of repairs, you need to notify your supervisor and make arrangements for that. Is, you know, when I read this and try to decide what it's trying to tell you, you know, you need to notify your supervisor.
That's what I think it's trying to tell you.
Yeah.
But
okay, rework that one.
I think that if we're gonna do something like what Commissioner Cowles handed out here, we might wanna add a paragraph somewhere in here that tells you how to use it, where to keep it, shall be stored. And at that point, you could add in there that we'll also maintain, you know, a copy of maintenance records. So maybe a thing on administration or something in here, so that we're telling people what to do with this, that it's not an option.
Yeah, this is just kind of we're kind of discussing this today, and I'd like, you know, I pulled up Bonner counties. Maybe we can, you know, each go out and pull up different counties and read through them to see what
pulled up
if you know. Okay. So we're not reinventing the wheel. I mean, if somebody has something in there and it's only takes one line to say it, then let's use that instead of the.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other agencies that their vehicle use policy is a lot more fleshed out than ours.
Because we could make a Bible out of it. And
it's
easier to make it as short and sweet as we can, so people actually read it.
And some of it, just the English could be tightened up on page 2, section 3, assigned or permissive drivers. Well, really, we could just say authorized drivers, but permissive drivers doesn't even make good.
Go back to the B section where anybody can drive.
I mean, I know they mean people with permission, but permissive doesn't mean that. I mean, it just sounds a little strange. Like, you can only drive if you're a permissive.
Take it to your supervisor, just take the issue and or take the vehicle and go, hey.
Well, and you do kind of have to think about that when you're looking at language with these policies, because, you know, I have a lot of staff in my department, and some of them will read and do exactly what the wording tells them to. Others will look at it with a little broader scope, and, you know, there are a lot of different types of thinkers that work at Shoshone County.
Policy ordinances, the words matter.
Yeah, I think making it as plain and as simple as we can.
Simplify it. But defined. Some of it's very gray.
can't define it, how do you know whether you're abiding by it or not?
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other comments or questions regarding this? Maybe we can revisit this in another 2 weeks and start, hammering down and changing some policies, and then, bring it up to a draft. See if we can, and then, on our time off or our time away, we can go back and, look at other policies to see if there's anything that we can see if it'll help us or not.
I think you're close, obviously.
Yeah, it's nice to already have something to start with.
Add some stuff in, come up with some policy
Mm-hmm.
defining how to use the checklist, and who can use, who can't, and what means.
Okay. All right. Do you have any other further questions?
Nitpick things that we can do when we're
Yep.
English changes.
Okay. Any other?
No.
Sydney?
Nope.
Nope. All right. We're adjourned.